What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the FantasyPros YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wencl, and today we're talking about 10 players that you should be looking to stash ahead of the Week 4 slate and ahead of next week's waivers as well. Before we dive on into that list, though, you can take the guesswork out of waiver wire decisions with FantasyPros Waiver Assistant. It will give you instant analysis on potential moves from over 100 fantasy experts. You'll also discover both the weekly and rest of season impact for every waiver ad. All you have to do is visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Again, all you have to do, visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app to optimize your roster today. Kicking off our list this week is Chicago Bears running back Roschon Johnson, who's rostered in 13% of leagues. The Bears' running attack has been abysmal to start the season, accumulating only 157 yards on the ground while boasting the 9th worst EPA per rush. Something needs to change because DeAndre Swift ain't getting it done. In Week 3, we saw Roschon Johnson start to mix in, playing 36% of the snaps while getting 8 carries and 6 targets. His 62 total yards on the afternoon were 20 more than DeAndre Swift, and for the second straight week, Swift averaged less than 1.6 yards per carry on the ground. Despite being a healthy scratch in Week 1, Shane Waldron might be forced to play Roschon Johnson more if DeAndre Swift is going to continue to play this poorly. He's an easy stash this week, with opportunity to have standalone value in future weeks. The second player on our list is Jalen Nailor, wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings, who's rostered in 12% of leagues. Nailor was on our stash list last week and came through once again. He played at least 85% of the snaps for the second straight week, ran just as many routes as Justin Jefferson, and found the end zone for the third straight game. He should have had another score as well, but it was called back due to a blatant Aaron Jones penalty. There's optimism from Kevin O'Connell that Addison could be back in Week 4, but as of this recording, Addison has only practiced in limited fashion this week. Even if Jordan Addison is back against the Packers, Nailor has done enough to earn more snaps as the third option on this team. There's also no guarantee the Vikings shove Addison a full workload in his first week back from injury, so there's still some time to be had here with the Vikings second-year wideout. Up next is Carolina Panthers wide receiver Xavier Legette, who's rostered in 12% of leagues. The Panthers officially put Adam Thielen on IR earlier this week, which means Xavier Legette should be the biggest beneficiary of his absence. Per PFF's Nathan Yonke, the team was consistently using Xavier Legette in 12 personnel, but would take him off the field in 11 personnel in favor of Adam Thielen and Jonathan Mingo. Remove Thielen from that equation now, though, and Legette's snap share should be on the rise as he sees more of the field in 11 personnel. It also helps that this Panthers offense finally showed signs of life under Andy Dalton last week, who was the first quarterback this season to throw for 300-plus yards and 3 touchdowns in the same game. If this upward trend continues for the Panthers, Legette should be trending upwards as well, so stash him on your bench before he becomes a popular waiver wire ad. Our fourth player this week is Emanuel Wilson, running back for the Green Bay Packers, who's rostered in 11% of leagues. Last week, we saw Emanuel Wilson play only 7 less snaps than Josh Jacobs while outgaining him in yardage both on the ground and through the air. Now, for context, Josh Jacobs did play 12 of 16 snaps in the first quarter, and half of Wilson's rush attempts came in the fourth quarter when the game was locked up for the Packers. All in all, Wilson likely probably isn't much more than a handcuff for Josh Jacobs, but it is noteworthy to point out that Josh Jacobs' snap percentage has decreased every week this season. The Packers are likely looking to keep the tread fresh on Jacobs by playing him less when win probability is well in their favor, but Wilson is still worth a stash though, especially if he's going to continue playing second fiddle to Josh Jacobs while Marshawn Lloyd is on IR. Coming in next is Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Emanuel Wilson, who's rostered in 11% of leagues. Last week, Wilson took advantage of a great matchup with the Lions, catching 8 of his 9 targets for 64 yards. His 14.4 fantasy points was good for the wide receiver 28 on the week, and finds himself in another favorable position in Week 4. He draws the Commanders, who have given up the most fantasy points to wide receivers this year, including the second most to wide receivers lined up on the outside. Not to mention, Trey McBride is still in concussion protocol as of this recording, and should he miss Week 4, more targets could be funneled Wilson's way. Looking ahead, he gets the 49ers and Packers in weeks 5 and 6, which could be high-scoring affairs, so Wilson is worth the stash not only for week 4, but for the foreseeable future as well. We're on to Philly now to talk about wide receiver Jahan Dotson, who's rostered in 9% of leagues. I truly don't know if there is a best Eagle wide receiver to stash this week, but I'm willing to mess around and find out if I have room on my bench. As of this recording, it seems unlikely neither A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith will be ready for their Week 4 matchup with the Buccaneers, so that leaves Jahan Dotson, Johnny Wilson, and Paris Campbell as the available wide receivers. In Week 3, Dotson led all Eagles wide receivers in snaps and routes run, but we may need to crown him the newest cardio king because he only drew 2 targets. Dotson's mere presence on the field gives him the most potential opportunity to provide fantasy relevance in the coming weeks, and considering how banged up Tampa's secondary is, I'm willing to take a dart throw on the third-year wideout. Another wide receiver you should look to stash is Ricky Pearsall of the San Francisco 49ers, who's rostered in 8% of leagues. Now, Pearsall is still currently on the non-football injury list and isn't eligible to come back until week 5. That's why we're going to go ahead and stash him now. As of this recording, Debo still hasn't practiced ahead of week 4, and George Kittle only practiced in limited fashion. The injury woes run deep for the 49ers, and if they continue to linger, the first-round rookie out of Florida has a real chance to step into opportunity once he's reactivated. If you have an open IR spot, it may not be the worst idea to put Pearsall there this week, and if you're in a deep league and have room to stash a 0 for week 4, it may pay off in future weeks once Pearsall returns. Turning back to the running back position, our next stash is Pittsburgh Steelers running back Cordarrelle Patterson, who's rostered in 3% of leagues. Both Najee Harris and Jalen Warren are banged up entering week 4, leading the way for Arthur Smith to deploy his beloved Cordarrelle Patterson. Look, in all seriousness, Najee Harris is likely to suit up against the Colts, despite being seen in a sling after their week 3 win against the Chargers. Jalen Warren, on the other hand, it's not looking so good. Not only was he dealing with a hamstring injury throughout training camp, but now he's dealing with a knee injury. Should Warren sit out in week 4, that only opens the door for Cordarrelle to see touches alongside Najee Harris. The Colts defense hasn't exactly defended the run this year, giving up the most rushing yards in the entire league through the first 3 weeks. Patterson sure isn't a sexy stash, but he's one that could provide some value should Warren miss more than week 4. Another running back to stash is Tyler Badie of the Denver Broncos, who's rostered in only 1% of leagues. This is really for all you people playing in deep, nasty leagues out there where the waiver wire is a barren desert. Similar to Emanuel Wilson, Badie primarily mixed in late game when the Broncos were up 23-7, but it's worth noting he looked the part. His 9 rush attempts were just as many as Javonte Williams and Jaleel McLaughlin's combined, and he racked up 63 yards, averaging 7 yards per tote. After the first 2 weeks, we assumed this Broncos backfield would be a 2-man rotation between Javonte and McLaughlin, with Badie being sprinkled in. However, Sean Payton has the opportunity to flip this whole thing on its head and make this a true 3-headed monster after Badie showing in week 3. Again, if you're in a deep league and need a stash, throw a dart on Tyler Badie this week and see how this backfield shakes out. Last but not least, for all of you playing in leagues where you start a defense and special teams unit, you can look to stash the Green Bay Packers, who are rostered in 29% of leagues. I saw a comment on last week's video suggesting this, so I thought we'd give it a go this week. With first round of buys starting to hit in week 5, it may be worth stashing a defense if you started the season streaming them. Quietly, the Packers have been the second best defense in fantasy football this year, scoring 22 points against Will Levis and the Titans last week, and 12 points the week prior against the Colts. This week, they draw the Vikings in Lambeau, which could provide some value, but in week 5, they get the Rams, who will still be Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua-less. If you want to jump on the waiver wire to make sure you lock up your week 5 defense, you can look Green Bay's direction if you need to stash and stream. Alrighty, y'all, that's it. That's all I got for you today, but before we sign off here, remember, you can take the guesswork out of waiver wire decisions with FantasyPros Waiver Assistant. It will give you instant analysis on potential moves from over 100 fantasy experts. You'll also discover both the weekly and rest of season impact for every waiver app. All you have to do is visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Again, all you got to do, visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app to optimize your roster today.